There was a time in America when life moved just a little slower, where the air was filled with the smell of fresh-cut grass, the crackle of vinyl records, and the hum of big, beautiful cars with tail fins and chrome. This was the 1960s. Captured in color, it was a decade that defined a generation, full of contrasts, from the comfort of suburban life to the turbulence of change. Today, we take a stroll back in time, to the front porches, five and dimes, and Formica countertops of life in America, the 1960s, in color. The typical American home in the 1960s was buzzing with optimism. Mom wore her apron like a badge of honor, and Dad often worked a steady 9 to 5. The American dream was alive, and it came with a split-level house, a lawn to mow, and a black and white TV that just might get upgraded to color. Tupperware parties were social events. Plastic was the future. Kids rode their banana seat bikes until sunset, and doors were often left unlocked. Everything inside the home was designed for convenience. The General Electric refrigerator stood proudly in the kitchen. The console TV was furniture. And the telephone? It had a long, curly cord and was usually attached to the wall. Fashion in the 60s exploded with color and confidence. Early in the decade, you'd still see men in slim-cut suits and fedoras. Think Don Draper. But as the years passed, so did the rules. Women embraced bold prints, miniskirts, and beehive hairdos. Teenagers were trendsetters, thanks to the Beatles and Twiggy. Bell-bottoms, go-go boots, tie-dye. Everything seemed to say, let's make a statement. Turn on the television and you'd be greeted by icons: Bonanza, The Andy Griffith Show, Bewitched, and The Flintstones. Families gathered around for The Ed Sullivan Show, where the Beatles made their legendary debut in 1964. Over 70 million people tuned in. For many, it felt like the whole country held its breath in black and white, but remembered it in color. Saturday mornings were made for cereal and cartoons, and at the drive-in, teenagers packed into Impalas to catch the latest Elvis flick or a cheesy sci-fi B-movie. The 1960s were not just about peace and love. It was also a time of jaw-dropping innovation. NASA put men into space, and by the end of the decade on the moon. America watched in awe as Neil Armstrong took one small step in 1969. At home, the future was arriving fast. Transistor radios fit in your pocket, microwave ovens were still new and mysterious, and every living room proudly displayed a hi-fi stereo system the size of a dresser. Technology wasn't everywhere, but it was just beginning to change. Everything. In school, kids learned cursive, diagrammed sentences, and respected authority. The Pledge of Allegiance was said every morning, and chalk dust filled the air. Teenagers, though, were beginning to break away from their parents' world. They had rock and roll, they had freedom, and they had dances in the gym, where the twist and the mashed potato ruled the floor. Music was everything. From the Four Seasons to Motown, kids carried portable record players and counted down the hits on AM radio. If you wanted freedom in the 1960s, you got a car. The highways stretched out like ribbons of possibility, and American automobiles were at their peak. The Ford Mustang debuted in '64 and captured the nation's imagination. Gas was cheap, drive-ins were booming, and every teenager dreamed of cruising under neon lights with the radio blaring. You didn't just drive in the 60s, you cruised. Dinner was sacred. Families gathered around the table, or sometimes the television, for meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and a tall glass of whole milk. TV dinners were cutting edge. Jell-O came in every color, and soda fountains were still the place to go for a burger, fries, and a Coke. Mom's cookbook had recipes with names like tuna surprise or ambrosia salad. And somehow, it all tasted better in the glow of a yellow Formica countertop. But for all the warmth and wonder, the 1960s were not always easy. The decade was marked by growing pains. The civil rights movement surged forward, led by Martin Luther King Jr. and countless brave Americans demanding justice. Protests against the Vietnam War shook college campuses and living rooms alike. It was a time when the country had to take a hard look at itself. Change wasn't just coming, it had arrived. The 1960s were a time of hope, upheaval, joy, and revolution. A decade when we reached for the stars and looked inward too. When kids played outside till dark and history played out on television. When the world was changing fast, but somehow we held on to the little things that made life feel familiar. And now, decades later, when we see it all again in full color, we remember not just what it looked like, but how it felt. Thanks for joining us on Retro and Beyond. Until next time, keep the past alive.